In a minute, I'm going to invite up here to the podium Dapina McMillan and Carmen Morgan. Actually, perhaps I'm inviting them right this minute.
Oh, okay.
Look, because we're going to start to make a shift now and talk with you over the next, this afternoon and tomorrow morning about diversity and inclusion, which is major initiative for TCG right now. It's part of our strategic plan, and we have lots of exciting work to share with you this afternoon and tomorrow. So, Dapina and Carmen.
Wonderful. Can you hear us okay? Great. I know it's been a long day, but we're going to kind of try to keep this exciting and happy for you all. And we're just really here to give a little bit more context about our diversity and inclusion work, what we've done over the past year, and set up some of the conversations we're going to have tomorrow.
Look, we're going to start off by asking for your support. We would like you to muster all of the energy that you have left and bring it to the space as we close out, right?
Yes.
Okay, ask them for that. So, JP and I, we were talking about the importance of this morning's conversation with the emphasis on fiscal health. Really saw a very direct connection and correlation to the conversation that we're going to be having, which is really focused on a conversation about the culture of an organization and the health of the organizational culture. So both of those things are really important. I mean, I like the conversation about being fiscally sound and really being able to focus on brick and mortar stuff, but you also want to make sure that the human resources and the capacity of the people in the organization are also healthy. So with that, that's our segue into having this conversation. We want to kind of tee this up for tomorrow, which is really going to be more substantive about what the work has been looking like in the field. So we're basically the teaser. Exactly, the teaser.
And speaking of the teasers. So speaking of vitality and speaking of vital, I think that I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about what we've been able to accomplish in a year together with all of you. A year ago, we were in a similar room, sort of, a little bit less high-tech, with our Leading the Charge Fall Forum. And that entire Fall Forum was focused on diversity and inclusion. Some of you remember our friend from Johnson & Johnson. There were a lot of conversations about how we actually define diversity, what do we mean by inclusion, really kind of high-level stuff. And so it's exciting to see what came after that. It really led us in how we were going to curate our national conference in Dallas. We had a dedicated programmatic arc focused on diversity and inclusion. Some of you were in some of those homeroom conversations. Also, we were really partnering with our Latinos in Theater group who had been really mobilizing at our conferences for years prior to that, really using Conference 2.0 as an online platform to mobilize. And I have to say, since then, they've had their first national convening with our friends at HowlRound just this past weekend. So that progress has been amazing. I see Leslie. Oh, I can get this to move. Oh, bam, that's where we are. Also, I think I just want to call out, I'm trying to find Jennifer Bilstein, because I think what we've also been able to do in the past year, and especially since the conference, is really solidify our relationship with the board. And really looking at how we can work together on things like recruitment and providing tools and resources for the field, knowing that a lot of our Lord theaters are part of TCG and how that can ripple out into a larger field. So I want to thank Jennifer for her leadership, and I know Tim is here as well, but that partnership with Lord is something I think we can all be proud of. Speaking of partnerships, at the Performing Arts Alliance level, diversity is a huge topic that we're championing at TCG, as well as working with APASO, which is a group of art service organizations. And just yesterday at TCG, we convened just theater service organizations from around the country about how we can work more collaboratively together, and diversity and inclusion is definitely one of those areas. So I just wanted to be charged up about the charge that we've had. And obviously we're going to focus on Diversity and Inclusion Institute, which 4 months ago this idea was birthed, and a lot has happened in that short amount of time, and we're going to focus most of our time on that.
Wonderful.
So Teresa basically mentioned our plan. I know it's been a long day, so we're not going to go into detail of that, but just to really call out that there are two main areas that we're focusing on, really establishing a baseline of tools and research. And a lot of this work, I feel, is really centered around us all being knowledgeable about what the heck we've been talking about, or what has happened over the years. An action-oriented program. I'm looking at Amelia because she's been spearheading our Young Leaders of Color program for 8 years, and we're looking at actually redefining, narrowing, but also expanding that. And we talked about nurturing leaders of color. Several of them are here today, and those conversations have been really led at the board level as well, and our institute. So, one of the main things I'm excited about that we've done is create a 2-year fellowship, our Diversity and Inclusion Fellowship. And I'm excited about what this role can do for the field moving forward. And I want to actually recognize Ty Defoe, who is our new Leading the Charge Diversity and Inclusion Fellow. Ty, will you please stand? Thank you, Ty, for being here. He hasn't even officially started yet, but we wanted him to be a part of these conversations in the Institute meeting we had yesterday. Ty is a lot of things, an artistic producer, a curator, an archivist, a dancer, a Grammy Award winner, a community organizer, amazing person. So if you haven't met Ty, say hi before you leave. All right.
Okay, should I stand over here so that this part of the
Yeah,
room
let's
gets...
share the love.
I just realized, why are we huddled around that podium when we have these speaker things on? Okay. So, we wanted to answer the question of, I don't know, could you just raise your hand if you know about this Diversity and Inclusion Institute? How many of you even know about it?
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's a really good... So we wanted to try to answer this question, why? Why do we need to, create yet another collaborative institute? Or why are we doing this? Well, we really wanted to try to take advantage of this growing momentum. You just heard Dafina talk about a lot of conversations that have been happening. And there are many, many others that are happening on an institutional level, and for sure, a lot of conversations that are happening within very specific theaters around this issue and valid conversation around diversity and inclusion. So we wanted to try to take advantage of this growing momentum in the field and to try to support intentional peer learning communities. A lot of this also comes out of what you heard earlier today as well, which is collective impact, right? So we wanted to try to create a peer learning community that would provide not just support, so that David could pick up the phone at Steppenwolf and call Michael over at Lark and say, look, what's going on with your outreach plan for your board diversity, but that there would be mutual accountability. And when we met yesterday, a lot of that was coming up. There are 20 theaters that are a part of this institute, along with TCG, so there's a total of 21 groups. And every time we get together, the conversation moves and starts at a different place. And so the level of trust is growing, the level of candor is growing, and folks were really clear that, they wanted to really have not just a space to support one another, but a space where they could hold each other accountable. And then obviously we wanted to maximize individual effort and minimize duplication. So this is what we're trying to do. This is overarching. There's a lot of very specific steps that we're taking, but this is what we're trying to do with this container called the Institute. All right? So some of the goals, again, this is big picture stuff. Tomorrow you're going to hear about what the work looks like in the field with far more specificity. So distracting, but I'm going to play it off. Okay. So you're going to hear more about the Institute with more specificity, but again, big picture, overarching, what are we trying to accomplish here? Some of the big goals are, and this is what, we put out this call to the field and we said, could you sign up for this commitment for 3 years? And the folks that answered that call said, yes, we can sign up to this commitment for 3 years. And the criterion was pretty simple. It was, Are you thinking about this stuff, doing anything about it around diversity and inclusion? Can you commit for 3 years, and are you willing to work collaboratively? And then when we got folks together, we said to them, in addition to that, we really want to push and challenge you to take on a leadership role. Take on a leadership role in the field so that you're stepping out front, and when other theaters reach out to you, you'll be responsive. Are you willing to be creative and innovative problem solvers? Are you willing to boldly try out new ideas and initiatives? And can we together learn and grow and share best practices? And you know, earlier today we were talking about how sometimes we don't want to talk about the things that don't work well. We're really motivated to just talk about what the successes are. Well, we've committed to create a learning community that is holding up some challenges and struggles. Almost every time we get together, we talk about, you know, what are some of the challenges and what are the struggles. So, and we don't want this to just be an insular conversation. We want to, if y'all think it might be helpful to know what our lessons have been, what we're learning, we want to hold that up and share that. So, who are these people who, when we said, are you willing to commit for 3 years? Who are they? Who are the ones who said, yes, we're willing to commit for 3 years?
This is our 21 group here, and a lot of the folks are in the room, so I would love to acknowledge those folks and the commitment that they made. So when I say your name, will you please stand and remain standing? Catherine Carr-Kelly, Megan Sandberg-Zakian, Cynthia Barger, Paul Deckert, Central Square Theater. Tim Jennings, Jill Jensen, Children's Theater Company. Marshall Jones, Crossroads Theater Company. Sandra Session Robertson, Dallas Children's Theater. Heather Kitchen and Rebecca Fletcher, Dallas Theater Center. Paul Slee, Ensemble Studio Theater. Michael Rosenberg, the sexy, as well as you and Tim. I know I said him, Tim. I'm sorry. You're sexier. Michael Rosenberg. Sorry. Michael Rosenberg, La Jolla Playhouse. Anna Call and Michael Robertson, the Lark Play Development Center. Cortland Laval and Loretta Greco, Magic Theater. Sarah Bellamy, Penumbra Theater Company. David Schmidt, Steppenwolf Theater. Erica Floresca, Tectonic Theater Project. Abe Ryback, Theater Offensive. And Ted DeLong and Catherine Moss, Oregon Shakespeare Festival. All right.
We know that these theaters are not the only theaters, obviously, out doing really compelling and important work. This is the first cohort of folks that have said, yes, we're willing to work together with TCG as the anchor organization. We're hoping that those of you who are doing really compelling work will reach out to these theaters and collaborate, do some regional projects and collaborations together. Again, you know, we just want to try to maximize. We don't want to, if we can maximize what was that other workshop, what was it called, the collaborative spirit? Well, anyway, if you can maximize collaboration is what we're trying to suggest.
Model the movement.
Thank you, that's right, model the movement. And we don't want to suggest that this is the only work that's happening, obviously. So just quickly, I want to talk about some of the features of what this container, this institute is offering. And again, this goes back to collective impact and some of the principles from collective impact, which is just ongoing, robust communication. So to that end, we are already starting to, thanks to Jacqueline leading some of the field reports, we're already starting to get experiences, successes, and challenges from some of these theaters who've been working on action plans and implementing them, and that's been posted to the TCG blog. In addition to that, we've got the 2.0 website portal for folks to continue to engage with one another.
Can I just stop right here because I do want to make sure that Jacqueline Lawton stands up. Where is she? Oh, come on. I was earlier. Jacqueline is our overall diversity and inclusion art curator for the TCG Circle, our blog, but is also documenting and curating the Institute work. And Gus Schulenberg, I know you're tweeting, so you may not be able to stand up.
I can't tweet and stand.
Has been a part of the team helping us communicate this great work. So those are just two members of the team I wanted to lift up. So sorry, Carmen.
No, absolutely. And we really are gonna try to leave some opportunities for question and answers at the end of this. And if we finish early, we want to go home, well, we want to leave dismiss early, isn't that right? So to the extent that we finish this up early, we're going to be able to leave early?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, quarterly conference call, continuous communication through webinars. We're trying to use technology wisely. And to the extent that we can get together and meet face-to-face, regional convenings, and intensive skills building. Folks have been really clear about really wanting resources, and they've named what they want those resources to look like. And Davina's going to talk a little bit about that. But before that, let me just talk about some, and look, this is what we're hoping will happen. We hope some of this will happen. And I've already implied this, but just coordinated diversity and inclusion efforts. Let's coordinate this work together. We'd like to, at the end of this 3-year initiative, have a national database with new theater-specific tools. We'd like to have done some deep learning together, struggle together, capacity building together, skills building together. We want there to be a really tight, out-of-control, crazy peer learning community, where these theaters will be working with each other in ways that they've never worked together before. And Abe has said, well, I'd like to see you pull that off. Do you mind me quoting you, Abe? Is it all right? Abe's like, I've already quoted you. Okay. So the bar's high. The bar's high. We don't want this to be window dressing. And we'd like to leave with a growing network of theaters who are leading the charge for greater diversity and inclusion in the arts. That's what we hope to accomplish.
That's what we're trying to do. So one of the things we did post Fort Worth, where we had our kickoff meeting, was to really try to create a container of support and accountability for the Institute theaters to actually create action plans, work plans for the immediate 6 to 9 months or to a year. This was a tool that we provided to help us think about, again, goals, action steps, budget assumptions, ties into our work today that it needs to be holistic thinking. And we worked with those theaters to get them feedback. And it was interesting because there were some themes that continued to rise to the top. I would say there were 7 of them, and the first was really focused on recruitment. 70% of our Institute members said this was the #1 priority. When we talk about recruitment, it's inclusive recruitment on the board level, on the staff level. This is something that we've been really digging into in our webinar and also in our meeting yesterday. Carmen, anything to add?
No, I think you got it.
A lot of our Institute leaders, especially since Fort Worth, some were already had the structure in place, are really looking at how to create effective diversity and inclusion committee structures amongst the board and staff and artists and community partners. We're also looking at organizational-wide policies and structures to actually hold people accountable at our institutions around diversity and inclusion. This is obviously a big one and ties into our work with our Audience Revolution engagement program that we're doing at TCG, but obviously a lot of this work is geared to how do we really have holistic, authentic conversations and partnerships with our community leaders. Training and education, I mean, that's half of what we do in the Institute, is how do we actually have a deeper knowledge of the work we're doing, the language we're using, our own biases. So this isn't, again, as Carmen said, just surface level. We want to go deeper around always consistently providing education for this work. Measurement, surveys, analytics. A lot of our theaters are figuring out how we can capture demographics better on our board and our staff, how people can self-identify. A lot of folks have some audience engagement measurement tools, but we're really looking at how do we actually know what our baseline is so we can figure out how we're moving forward and measure that progress. And communications and marketing is really how do our Institute theaters and all of us do a better job about communicating this work internally, so the staff and board know what we're doing around diversity and inclusion, and also what is the external communication we're doing around this work. Very important.
Okay. I actually want to, before we leave you with a resource that we created that we think will be helpful, I want to just share with you some of what has been really challenging in this time that we've gotten together, and it's only been about 4 months. This work can be really challenging. It's daunting on many, many levels. It connects to all of the ways in which people identify, and it's sometimes very difficult to have a dispassionate conversation about it. We feel oftentimes that we have to keep making the case for why it's important. Earlier today it was just a given that we need fiscal health of an organization, but there are times when it doesn't seem to be as apparent that diversity and inclusion issues are just as critical. It's been challenging because we're working with theaters who are at lots and lots of different places in terms of how long they've been doing this work. It's been challenging because we have to make there are some assumptions that are embedded in the way that we're having these conversations, and sometimes just even naming those assumptions can be difficult. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we're also talking about predominantly white theaters. And sometimes just lifting that up gets a lot of pushback, a lot of challenging. What do you mean? We're not predominantly white, we're not. So I just want to lift up that we've been really, so it means that it's taking time, and because folks are at different places, organizations and theater institutions are at different places, we're really trying to take this in a scaffolded way, right? So just to hold up some of what we've been talking about and what has been challenging. And at the same time that we do this work and we talk about the successes and what we want to get out of it, we want to hold up what's been really challenging, because we need support. We need your support. So this is a resource that we thought we would share with you. This came out pretty early on, actually. The very first time that we got together in Dallas and launched the Institute, we were starting from a place where it was just sort of understood, well, there's a moral imperative for this work. And one of the questions that came up was, actually, make the case for it. Can you make the case for diversity and inclusion? And so we not then and there, but we went back and said, yeah, I think we can make the case for it. And we want to share with you some of this because it connects to what was discussed earlier, and particularly for those of you who are trustees and on boards, you're always needing to look at the bottom line. So why diversity and inclusion? Why bother with it? Why now? And for some of you, there's a moral imperative, and it's tied to your mission and your vision, and it's just it's something that's just a part of the core of how you think about your work. But we want to talk about it through lots of different lenses. So first of all, we think it's because it will create quality art. A lot of the research has shown that effective organizational performance is connected to a diversity of staff and individuals that come from varied backgrounds. Bringing those different perspectives to the table, having a diversity of ideas and solutions around the table in any workplace culture actually results in new ways of working, new services, and new collaboration. So one of the core reasons for why diversity and inclusion, why bother, why now, is because it actually creates better art at the end of the day. The other is because, and this was touched upon earlier today, you all want the very best talent. I mean, you want to hire and retain and keep the very best. A tremendous amount of money goes towards human resources in the form of salaries, benefits, training, development. Staffing is a big ticket item, or it's a large line item. And to have to replace staff on a continual basis affects your bottom line. So one of the reasons is you want to get and retain the very best staff. The other is connected also to this morning's conversation. You want to reduce costs. That's connected to what I just said about getting and retaining folks. But environments where employees feel included and valued, not only do they yield more commitment and motivation from the employees, it translates into fewer resources being spent on employee turnover, grievances, and actual lawsuits. So it affects your bottom line. The other is being able to be nimble and creative, effectively managing change. There's one single thing that an organization committed to diversity and inclusion does well, typically better than most organizations, and it's they're able to manage change. And that's because individuals working in inclusive organizations react more quickly to their environment, to environmental changes, because there's a higher level of communication and collaboration that's happening in those organizations. The other is that it just goes without saying that you want to value every person that works within your organization. And people, even if I feel like I'm being taken care of, if I see my colleague not being taken care of, I don't feel safe. So most people actually want to work in organizations that value not just them, but the people that work with them.
And Carmen, I just want to also say, we decided to cut the slide that said how we define diversity and how we define inclusion. And I like to say the diversity is actually a noun, it's the difference in the room, but the inclusion is the activation. So when you're saying people feel welcome, et cetera, it's how do you actually change that culture so everyone can speak up and speak out. So I just wanted to take a moment. That diversity is great to have the numbers there, but how are they actually integrated and a part of that culture and so
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of you all have already made that distinction, and you're already working in your theaters with that working assumption, but thanks, Davina. I think it's always helpful to underscore that. And then, you know what, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we've talked about already. Are we going to talk a little bit about the demographic shift? Are we going to jump to that?
You ready for that?
Well, I think I want to follow what you have up here. I want to follow what you've got.
There we go.
Okay, so the other is, you know, after the 2010 census, we saw a lot of interesting demographic trends. One is that there continue to be a growing number of women in the workplace. There continue to be a growing number of people with disabilities. And it is projected that the number of individuals with disabilities will be moving into the workforce at the tune of an increase of 10% every year. So we want to be able to have work environments that are accessible to that population. And then, obviously, it goes without saying.
And I think we just wanted to put up this slide. Some of you saw this at the fall forum last year. Angela Glover-Blackwell from PolicyLink did a beautiful presentation, and I think we all probably know this, but 2042 is the number that we're looking at as far as being a majority people of color nation. And we also recognize that some communities, LA, California, are already in that majority situation. So, demographics.
Absolutely, right. So that we can stay in communication with our communities. You know, what is the nation going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years? And forgive me for just reading my notes, but some of these points I don't want to miss. But we're wrapping this up. I think you already touched upon this, Davina, in the slide, but many of us know that it's one of the reasons why we're committed to diversity and inclusion is because it's tied to our mission, it's tied to our values, and ultimately there's no better reason to work towards diversity and inclusion except that as an organization you're committed to those values and you're ready to take that work on. And for some of you, it's not just socially responsible, it's a moral imperative. And then the last reason is because we actually do want to change the world. We do want to change the world. And I mean, I feel like, I know because I come out of a civil rights background and a community activist background, we have been looking to the arts and theater for a really long time to hold up ideals and values and the power of transformative change. And so we want to close with Tony K. Bombara's quote: "The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible." The American theater is a part of that ongoing tradition. So why diversity and inclusion? Why not?
Why not? Why not?
Okay.
So I think, Carmen, we want to just open it up if there are any questions or comments. If there aren't, we can also leave early, but we'd love to get creative. I don't want to leave early. I'm just saying that the way we provide some space, because there are a lot of information I need. So,
Yeah, any questions?
oh, there's a question.
Hey, Carmen.
Hi.
You know that we're very invested in this effort with you at my theater. I guess what comes to mind as I'm sitting in this room, and I think I've been coming to TCG meetings for maybe almost 20 years now. And this topic has been in the room and discussed for at least that long, and I'm sure longer. So why is this effort now going to be more successful or substantive than it has in the past?
I want to put that question out there to a lot of you all who are doing the work in the field. Why is this effort going to be more sustainable now than it has been in the past?
I think partially because those of us that have been raised in the theater for these 20 years have been a party to that conversation now, and we're now in charge of those theaters. You know what I mean? I think it has a better chance as time goes on. The immersion that we've had in the conversation. It's taking a long time, but it certainly is part of the process.
I would just add that I think that slide that shows the demographic changes for the next 25 years, this is an imperative. There's no choice. This is why it will work. Is it? Look at that. It has to. We don't have a choice. This is about economic security.
Pat Fleck, Shakespeare Theater Association. I think it's also because our young people are ready for it and asking for it.
Absolutely.
And you know, it's inevitable in so many ways. And I'm just proud to be here to see it actually going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen. Period.
And I just want to thank TCG so much for making this an integral part of your work plan, your strategic plan, your modeling, how diversity and inclusion is not an add-on. It's not the thing that, you know what I mean? And so I just think going through this process along with this organization is really lovely, and I appreciate that very much.
I also want to say that I think that our communities of color are also doing a lot of work in terms of revaluing valuing what they have to offer and coming to the table on equal footing. That's a very big change as well. And that both entities want to do a lot of work. And we admit that we also have work to be done. And I think that that is a very different place that we're starting as well.
For me, I think just within the TCG context, so the original question is, you have one conversation and then you walk away, right? You go back to your community, you go back to your theater, and then nothing happens, or you have an idea and you don't call that person. And so for me, and I think for Anna, to be part of a sustained conversation with a group of people in the Institute means that the conversation doesn't die. It means that the idea I had by that person I didn't really know, I now by the second, third, fourth meeting, webinar, etc., know them better. So it feels like it's a sustained conversation rather than this one-off panel on diversity that we go, oh, we're so excited, we're charged up, and then, you know, by Monday, I'm back with my board, fundraising, dealing with the gala, dealing with a crisis because it flooded. I mean, all of those things. So for me, I think it's, and I'm interested to see what happens with the next cohorts in the Institute, but I want to praise TCG for taking something and there's not lip service behind this. Having been just an Institute for 4 months, it's really, really exciting to know that there are 20 theaters that are with this, and not that everybody else in the room isn't, but that I'm going to see these people regularly and have an iterative, exciting, deepened conversation rather than starting over every time. So I just appreciate that structure.
I am Mika Cole from the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I haven't been coming to the festival, to the conference for 20 years, but I have been coming for the past 7 or 8 years. And I have to say that I don't think we actually have been having the conversation, and we cannot understate the significance of having the conversation in this room at the level of leadership that it's being had today. That is a remarkable, tremendous improvement over the past 7 years. The conversations are often had after these big group convenings, right? In corners, at dinners, in small conference rooms, at our theaters. How these conversations are had by the young leaders of color in a completely separate conference track. So I think that the fact that we cannot opt out of this conversation and that we're having it at the leadership level is a significant change, and that's why I think it's going to be much more effective, hopefully.
I want to add one more thing. I'm over here. The work that I have witnessed in the last 4 months of these 20 theaters I mean, they are working. They are not just talking. There's not just conversations being had. They are going back to their organizations and they are working. And I can tell you that it's going to pay off this time. I can see the work being done. And you'll see it tomorrow. You'll actually see some of the work that's being done tomorrow.
And I would add, this is Jennifer Beilstein with Actors Theater of Louisville, but also on behalf of LORD. I think there's something to the collective action that is happening now. So with what TCG is doing, with what LORD is discussing and committing to, I think there's real power in that, and that's why we will be successful, because a lot of individuals and individual theaters have been working in this arena and trying to make progress for some time, but banding together, we'll move the needle, we'll move forward.
Hi, I'm Marshall Jones from the Crossroads Theater Company, and that's a great question to kind of frame everything here. I just want to say that we shouldn't forget the first generation of the people of color, people like Lou Bellamy, Sarah's father, Ricardo Kahn, who started Crossroads Theater Company. Woody King, all these guys did have these conversations in the 80s, afterwards. We also can't forget that in 1994, August Wilson, what that meant in terms of the TCG conference, and his speech, "On the ground of which I stand." So it's always been in a part of TCG's DNA, but I think we need to acknowledge Teresa and Dafina and the hard work that they've done so that it's not just talk. But I think the difference now, and David really mentioned it when we talk about the demographics of how it comes, that our forefathers that started these theaters and were on the front lines in the 60s and 70s, it was just the moral imperative. You know, we need these theaters because it's important. Now we can frame that within an economic context, and it's great that people are embracing it. So, thank you all.
The question I have is, what do you view as a good model in terms of diversity and inclusion? So, for example, we're looking at the graph, and for 2020, the percentages are 60% white, 20% Latino, 12% black. So do you view a reflection of those percentages as something that's advisable in both the staff and the casting that goes on with it? You know, so it's like, okay, great, they're doing great because they're reflecting 60% white and 20% Latino and 12% black, or is that, you know, what is it? And are people in the LGBT community included? And is there a gender percentage that's included in all of this? And I guess I'm just wondering, what's great? Like, what's the goal? What are we striving for?
Yeah, you know, I love that question because I feel like it gets, that is a starting place that we're actually trying to get people to move away from, which is to first step back and start fundamentally with your organization's, and this is also connected to what was discussed earlier this morning, your organization's vision and mission, and being really, really clear that it's rooted in that. Because in one organizational context, really focusing on increasing the amount of trans participation around the table because your emphasis is around gay liberation is what you want to focus on. In another organizational context, it might be, we absolutely have to do more work around ability issues. We have to create more access to the deaf community. So I think it's first starting with your organization's vision, mission, commitment, and then moving to a conversation about goals. What goals do we want to set? And this conversation, this comes up all the time about, well, do we want to look at national averages? Or do we want to look at our local community as benchmarks to strive for? Or do we want to look at the county? Again, I think that you all, when you create that conversation from a mission perspective, a vision perspective, a values perspective, and then please, and this again, it's connected to this earlier conversation, get buy-in from your stakeholders, the board and the staff. In some instances, it's appropriate to get buy-in from your local community partners. But I think that, I feel this strongly. I think that it is so not about a numbers game, because you can do all that you outreach and get those folks in that organization, and it's going to mean absolutely nothing if that organization that hasn't prioritized it, if the values aren't connected to it, and if the culture isn't one that values every person. So I would focus less on what numeric indicators we're looking for, and more on who are we and who do we want to be.
And it's good to be on the receiving end, because I just saw the stop sign, and I think that we have to stop unless Leslie has a burning, I know you've had your hand up for a while. It can be our final comment.
Sure.
No pressure.
Thank you.
No pressure.
Well, Leslie Ishii. What's that?
I said no pressure.
Leslie Ishii from East West Players, and sadly but proudly, we hold the mantle of the oldest person of color theater in the country now. So we're really doing our best to take leadership and develop alliance building, which has to do a lot with how racialization happens, the race dynamics, and what has held us back. The question of why now and why do we think it'll work? I think partly because of Carmen's work and TCG's work, we're breaking isolation. So you can't run off into the blue with your biases. That's what we mean by accountability. You check in with the group. So if you have white guilt or we have internalized depression as people of color, we're not isolating and in those cycles. The other thing is we're finding out, we're waking up as a global community and as a national community that the systems that are in place are not working for enough people. I think that's why it's going to work, truly. And I'm so pleased to see all the brainstorming going on and the learning about capitalization, because we're creating new systems. It's so exciting. So thank you so much for everyone being here to help a new paradigm to be created. And what, oh my God, how great through the arts and how appropriate. So thank you, thank you.
3 comments to wrap this up. One is, Marshall had a great comment about some of the pioneer leaders of our field as far as Woody King, Lou Bellamy, Luis Valdez. And what I skimmed through earlier was our 6-point initiative, and the Legacy video project is about capturing those stories, what their ambitions were, what their impetus was, and we want to make sure that we can make those visible to all. Second, just to lift up, I think why I think this will work now is because, again, it has been a core value of TCG for a while. I'm looking at Amelia because she's been doing this work forever. Oh no, that's not a good sign. Oh no! But I think for me, it's the intentionality of the work. We have a plan. It's more than a value and a vision, but we're actually creating this space. And I want to just lift up Carmen, how far we've come in a year.
I'm looking at you.
And Teresa and Kevin and our amazing staff. And we also, the last point I want to make is the reason that TCG is intentionally one of the 21 organizations. We're convening and creating this container, but we're also recognizing that we have to go through the work. So we're playing a dual role. And I also think that's why it's going to be different, because we have to do it internally for our own staff, board, etc. So thank you for your time and your energy. I have a few notes. I've thanked Carmen. We'll miss you. She had to fly off tonight, but you'll be with us in spirit tomorrow. Again, we're going to hear from Xavier Verna of Sphinx, who's going to talk about some of the similarities and differences with diversity and inclusion in the classical music world. And we're also going to have our 6 Fabo Institute theaters actually sharing what happened from their action plans. Where were their stumbling blocks? What were the successes? And what are some of the lessons
Remember,
learned?
Abe wanted us to do a special shout out. Abe has something very special planned.
Oh, burlesque is going to happen.
He wanted us specifically to say that
Looking for
you don't want
volunteers.
you don't want to miss tomorrow.
And we're going to make it a very interactive conversation. So we're breaking now for the day, and if there's any NCAP members have questions about the National Council dinner, please see Blair or Meredith. We're gonna be leaving there for dinner in like 5 minutes. I hope you get a chance to see a show tonight, and we'll see you back tomorrow at 8:30. 8:30. Thank you.